Hello, world. Welcome back to another very fun D&D Beyond stream. I'm joined by an amazing panel here to just get in the Valentine's spirit of things and talk about our love stories and our true love origins with D&D. The moment where we realized we were in a fully committed relationship with a tabletop role-playing game. I'm joined by an incredible panel. I will go in order of accessories. Introducing first from Pixel Circus, Saige Ryan. Hey, Saige, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. You literally just read out my Twitter bio on accident. My Twitter bio says in a committed relationship with D&D. I'm like, not kidding.
Oh, this is great. No, this is perfect. I'm not sure if I have Amy's Twitter bio down by heart yet, but from you know her from DC Daily, you know her from Geek and Sundry, Amy Dallen. Hey, Amy.
Hello. It's so good to be here. I like to think that there are a lot of us that you're just like, we want to talk about D&D, and we materialize out of bushes. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, yeah, it's a full like conch shell situation where everyone shows up. And speaking of managing to show up in full senioritis mode, the one and only, look, if you want some hints as to where he's headed, I think he's dropping some serious, I'm going on tour with a jazz trio vibes right now. Heading into his entirely new field as a street musician in New Orleans, Adam Bradford, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, I'm Adam, and I have been the VP of Tabletop here at Fandom for a little while here, founder of D&D Beyond, moving to some exciting new adventures before too much longer. But yeah, I kind of like this whole Dungeons and Dragons thing too. So I guess you're going to get a little peek into, if you haven't gotten enough of a peek in the last 3 years, into why I love this game so much today. Happy to be here. Obviously, I'm very happy to be here.
Super happy to have you in whatever current medicated state of mind you're in, Adam. I am so super happy to have you on this panel. So let's jump into it. You know, this is a little bit origin stories. You know, this is a little bit what's the origin of your rom-com. Saige, we're the newest in terms of being pals in this quartet on camera. So
true.
When was the first time you fell in love with D&D? Like, what's your first memory of just really kind of falling in love with the game?
So my first exposure to D&D, I was already in kind of like the streaming and nerd space, and where I grew up, there was nobody that played D&D. I grew up in South Orange County, and like there just wasn't any D&D community that I had access to. So I didn't get to play D&D until I was like 19, I want to say. And a friend of mine finally was like, I have a group. I have people, we are doing this. And I loved it immediately. I think I started with a Star Wars reskin of D&D, actually. It was the first one I got to play. It was a little more complicated, but I think the moment that like truly sold me on Dungeons and Dragons was the first time I played with strangers. It was such an incredible experience to sit at a table with mostly people that I didn't know and form just immediate bonds in these characters and in these moments, and have this like fear of role playing go away, and this fear of or like social anxiety of new people just gone immediately, and the ability to connect through something that was made up in our heads. And I think that was the moment that I was like, oh no, this is it though. This is it.
I think that's amazing, because I think something I see a lot, like in our Discord and stuff like that, when people are talking with each other about D&D, is that fear of just kind of like going for it, and that fear of I hate the word cringe, but like that's what people, they're like, I don't want to come up as like cringe. And do any of you guys sort of have any like thoughts of how to like make that same love connection Saige made happen, in terms of just getting comfortable and kind of going for it?
What I can say, super quick, what I can say is that anytime I meet someone that I think is going to play any kind of role in my life. So whether that's like, so in the current job, it's been interviewing somebody that's going to potentially come and work here at Fandom, or, recently met some new long distance friends because of the world we're in right now. We can't see anybody. But all of these people, the very first thing that I try to do with them, and I'm heavily biased here, but the very first thing I try to do is play one of these games with them, because it genuinely is the way, just like Saige is talking about, you get to know people this is a complete make-believe situation, but you find out more about other humans more than any other activity. And I'm talking about any other activity. You find out more about them doing this than anything I have found over my almost 40 years on this planet. And so I think that, honest to goodness, D&D and playing a tabletop role-playing game, it is hard to get over that first hurdle of just the potential embarrassment, the lack of confidence, whatever that thing is. But once you can get over that first hurdle, there is nothing that I've been able to find that is more dynamic and more just deeply meaningful to find out about that other person. Because once you start cheering for somebody rolling a silly polyhedral plastic or metal or whatever you can afford out there, set of these dice, and something great happens, and you start cheering for this stranger, you're friends for life immediately after that.
Yeah. No. It's actually really funny because Amy and I just played D&D together for the first time a few weeks ago. And it is like the perfect example of that, where like we had been in passing. I knew Amy existed. I loved Amy from afar on the internet.
But we got to each other on Twitter trying to figure out how we actually met. Yeah,
exactly. But for the first time, we actually got to play together in a game. And truly, it's just like, now we sign onto this call and I'm like, hey! Yes! It feels like I know her in such a capacity that I absolutely don't.
Well, I guess to keep running with this rom-com metaphor, Saige was sort of talking about these like first date jitters that kind of like melted away the first time she played. Amy, how about you? Was it sort of similar, or it was kind of like, I don't know? And I've never been able to imagine you as nervous about anything.
Oh, wow. So nervous all the time. It's one of those, I guess thank you, I guess. But that is fascinating, because I was leaning towards saying that one of the things I find so interesting about this stuff is that like I intensely agree that the experience of getting to play with people is an incredible way to meet new people, to create very solid bonds among friends. But what I love is that like it is a very real cheat code towards social interaction, because it's actually happening. You really are sitting down being like, you are a stranger, but we have the same goal. And it's a goal that doesn't require another side to lose. It doesn't require making anyone look bad in any way. It is a collaborative goal of something we're all trying to do together. And that is really happening. And its success or failure is going to depend on how much we are each willing to put ourselves into it. Now, that structure doesn't mean that you will never encounter a person who is failing to live up to those modes of engagement. We all know that that can happen because people are people. But built into the actual activity that you're doing is the idea that we are all in it together. And I feel like that is so precious about it. And one of the things is, I still get nervous when I sit down to play with strangers. One thing that you do get to learn over time is like, those butterflies may never go away, but you can learn to make them part of the like, oh, this is the butterfly part. That's normal. That's how I experience this next step. And I can take it and channel that energy into, let's say, big over-the-top happiness, which is also real. But I would say it is comforting to me to rely on the fact that that nervousness may be there, that this may not work may be there. And that's real. But what that's telling you is that you care about other people's feelings. That's not a bad thing. You can take it too far, but fundamentally, you just want to make sure everyone has a good time. And that's awesome, because that's what we're actually here to do. That was a lot of answer to a lot of questions. I'm sorry.
That's really well said, though.
Loved all of it.
I didn't necessarily mean for the romance metaphor to go so deep, but you also just became a licensed marriage counselor, I think, as well. Well done.
I mean,
are you
absolutely.
listening to your DM? Are they listening to you?
Yeah,
in case people out there are not picking up what she's putting down, wouldn't it be amazing if everybody in the world approached life like we do these games when we're playing together? Absolutely. So yes, it's such a huge and that's the reason for me that storytelling is such a primal human need.
Mm-hmm. Well, Adam, when was the time that you realized that? I don't think I actually know your like your
Okay,
D&D
yeah. So ultimately, I grew up here in and around Huntsville, Alabama, which is where I remain to this day, and this is in the heart of the Bible Belt. And so when I
Space Camp.
was, yes, that's it. Space Camp too. Yeah, Space Camp's better than probably a lot of the results of the Bible Belt. But ultimately, as growing up here, young kid, I was just completely obsessed with Saturday morning cartoons. So G.I. Joe, huge one. You'll see a lot of those back on the shelf there. And Transformers. And then there was this D&D, Dungeons and Dragons show. And these ridiculous kids that got on this ride that just all of a sudden made their way into a magical land. And I watched it every single time it was on. It didn't stay on very long, but I still watched it. And anytime I could find it, like back in those days, trying to find out other ways I could watch it, begging my mom to take me to the Blockbuster Video or whatever it was. So absolutely adored that cartoon. And what was fascinating is I used to talk to my parents about it, and my parents would have been fine with it. But no one else's parents anywhere around me were fine with this Dungeons and Dragons thing. And so I used to want to try to find out more about it and was never able to, and then ended up going through grade school and everything else, and more or less playing D&D without knowing it. I would get in to classes with classmates and use graph paper and draw out maps. And hey, pick a number between 1 and 100, and I didn't even know I was like rolling dice in our heads or whatever at that point in time, and I was playing this game without even knowing that I was playing the game. And so finally, when I was I guess 13 or 14 years old, I was able to be introduced to tabletop role-playing games, and for whatever reason, it was okay if you were using the Force, as long as you weren't using magic, right? So this was, I was able to play, like, that was acceptable for the satanic panic portion of that. And so I started out playing West End games, Star Wars, the old D6 version that was just immaculate, and I still love it to this day. I still play it some to this day. And so I started out playing that, and then it wasn't long after that it was almost like a closet activity. Ironically, I was introduced through a student minister at a church. It was like, hey, you should play this Dungeons and Dragons thing. And we literally had to hide that we were doing it back in those days. But I immediately fell hook, line, and sinker. It wasn't long after that I was in college and third edition was coming out. So 1999, third edition came out, and I was working at a Books A Million. And that's really where it just got me, right? So I was working at a Books A Million to, work through college, and I was thumbing through those books instead of working. So I did no work on that job. I sat at the customer service desk and just read D&D books the entire day to like an encyclopedic level. And so it was like reading that first novel that was, Last of the Mohicans when I was a kid. Now I just remember like diving into that and thinking that it was just amazing fantasy. I read these rule books in that way. And so it wasn't long after that I was just begging people to play with me. Lots of people didn't want to at first, but I finally won them over. And yeah, the rest is history for me.
I feel like picturing you with like the graphs and the pick a number, that like what you're saying is childhood you accidentally invented D&D.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what happened. I mean, like, obviously, if Gygax had not happened, I would have gotten there. Okay.
Yeah.
Just publish those notes as a zine.
Yes.
That's it. I'll go back and find them. I'm sure my mom still has them.
Yeah. I think it's kind of fun. I mean, it seems like most of us were kind of late bloomers. Like, I know that when I was little, my intro to D&D, I know, Amy, you were in terms of actually playing, I know, Amy, you were like a bard as of
in all the
third
other
grade.
ways.
Yeah. You were an active bard as of like third grade, I think, Amy, if I remember correctly.
Might have been fourth.
Like,
yeah, I got lucky. I got introduced in elementary school, so it's been a lifelong love affair from second on down. But yeah, that was definitely came in handy that I had a cheat code to social interactions, since it really very much depended on having people to talk to who knew what you were talking about and cared about it. And anyway, I love the new world.
Very much wish I had had that.
Who introduced you though,
Yeah.
Annie? Like, what was it? Just a classmate, or was it a family member?
My little brother's friend. I had a friend, and her little brother and my little brother were friends, and somehow that three of us became the trio. I don't know how he got into it. But it was around the time, this is going to be ancient reference for anyone who might remember the DOS game Bard's Tale, right around this same time, was just like, what is this beautiful world? But we played a highly corrupted form of D&D. People have heard me say this many, many times, but I was being slightly older, but not the DM. I could just insist on which rules I felt like following, you know?
Sure.
So
Like me with Monopoly.
but that was a really great way as a fourth, fifth grader to get introduced to the game, because it was just all the fun parts of fun interactive storytelling, and then, you know, gradually introducing rules and mechanics as we went along. But yeah, that was just sheer luck.
My hook was because when I was little, you know, I have a much older brother, and I would bust into his room when he wasn't home because all of his stuff was cool. And he had just this little like leather carrying case full of like old Testors model paints, which were probably 10 years old at that point, and just this little set of like D&D lead figures. And so that was my intro. I didn't have like any other context for them.
They were actually lead. I'm glad you're still here today.
Oh, they were actually. Oh, look I used to just chew on them. Look at me, I'm killer. I'm fine. I think I ended up just using them to play like Hero Quest and stuff, honestly. But you know, I got hit by this Satanic Panic angle too. Like my first technical TTRPG intro was my best friend's older sister. They played Mage of the Ascension, and we tried to jump in, and then my parents were like, no, that's the vampire thing. No, sir, under no circumstances. So finally in college, and I guess this is weirdly traumatic, I don't know, maybe this is very telling of me. I finally got to play a game with some older classmates who I really looked up to. I was so excited. I made a paladin who was basically Agrius from Final Fantasy Tactics. And I've always wanted a husky, always in my life. And so I was like, can I have a husky? Can I have a husky? And they're like, well, normally like a ranger would have a dog. And I was like, can I have a dog? And they gave me a dog, and not through any, they weren't trying, but like in the first battle of the game, my dog died. And
No!
It was so traumatic. And I was stunned by that for like a week, where I was like, we need to get back to the table. And you know,
I
like
want to know about the John Wick campaign that came after all that.
Right? You know, and unfortunately, like most best attempts at home games, you know, it didn't continue.
Oh.
But like, I was like,
Joe, bring it back. Just write the next chapter of that story.
Right?
Yeah.
You control your destiny.
Just the fact that it stayed with me for so long. And it was just this communal experience we had all gone through. And there's this weird moment where my DM Jason like paused and sighed and was like, okay, yeah, the goblin succeeded. And everyone went, and it was this amazing, it was horrible, but it was this amazing like communal experience, and hooked ever since then, man.
I mean, like build like a necromancy wizard, like multi-class. Bring it back.
I know.
I heard your story, but like the dog. But what I'm concerned about here is the husky.
Yeah, someday Kafal will make a comeback. Kafal, King Arthur's dog. Yeah. But yeah, so hooked ever since then. What about the game? Saige, we'll start with you. What are like the moments, what are things about the game that sort of like keep you, I don't know, committed? Is it like things that it actually affects in your life, or?
Yeah. I think a large portion of it is the social interaction. My main social interaction these days is getting to play D&D with people. And especially in the pandemic, I mean, like that's genuinely been life-changing. I don't know what I would be doing in this isolation if I didn't have 2 games a week with my friends over the internet. That is gripping in itself. I, as someone who writes, get the opportunity repeatedly to write characters and use them and throw them away and write another. which is also very, very gripping for me to be able to be like, I have this idea and I don't have to write a whole screenplay for it. I'll throw it in a campaign. And if it dies, I get to do it again, which is so, so fun for me. And I'm also just an absolute fiend for like UA and Unearthed Arcana. Like I've been sitting here staring at the hex blood, staring at the reborn, and just being like this. So every time something new comes out, I think it does reinvigorate my love for the game, which like wasn't needed. I'm in 2 games a week. Come on. And yet now I'm like, okay, where are we putting this reborn?
If I promise to use some of that Unearthed Arcana to bring back that dog, can I jump into your table?
Sold. Yes.
Done.
You and the husky are invited.
Yes, perfect. My bleak,
or at least the husky.
Yeah, release the
huskies.
Release the
Always.
husky cut. Yeah. Adam, how about you? Like, what? I mean, look, man, you've made a career of this for ages now, and I mean, what
not
is
that
it?
long. I'm not that old, Joe.
7,000 years.
For ages.
For ages. Sorry,
Games like in your day before pencils.
Maybe it's the fact that you're now like holding a tenor sax in your lap. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. No, I think for me,
it keeps you in, man.
Yeah, I think for me, I again remember in those books a million days, to call back there. I remember going to the back of the player's handbook and seeing that Master Tools CD. And I remember at the time I didn't even own a computer. I can't even, that's wild to think about today, but I didn't know, because I have computer, like 4 of them on me, I think right now, but it's like, you know, I didn't even have a computer right then. And I remember going over to a friend's house and plugging that CD in, and just, you know, how that came up. And it's like, oh, I can build this character. It was incredibly limited and I could never do the character that I wanted, but I was just fascinated at that point in time. And so genuinely those are the seeds that became D&D Beyond eventually, because I remember playing through the back part of, you know, 3.5 days into 4th edition. Even I was at you know, a little bit of a stuffier defense and aerospace job for a decade or so there, where I would steal away moments. Apparently everybody is going to think I never worked at any job I was at. I actually have, I promise. But I would find moments while I was on the job there to develop access database, you know, tools and stuff that would help me run these games. And so it was like just constantly this amateur, I still don't know how to code to this day, but it was like Google my way to whatever was going to help me play. And so all of that ended up, you know, kind of coalescing into a place that, you know, 4th edition did its thing. I actually liked it, but
it was fun.
I liked it a lot, but you know,
there was a lull in the relationship, is what we're saying.
A little bit of a lull, maybe, because yet again, I couldn't find people to play with. And then, you know, when 5th edition came out, it really is, I think for me, it's mostly about what is that thing that, because I'm going to play these games regardless, but the thing that keeps me really committed, especially to Dungeons and Dragons, is, you know, what is it that is going to help me run those things in the best way? And for me, it's just tinkering. It's making new things that make that play easier. And so it's like thinking about a relationship and spicing up the relationship. It's constantly like, hey, how could that thing go better the next time we do it? And then I try to, you know, fiddle and tinker with that until I get a good result.
I like that. I dig that. Also, Melly is in chat. I want to hear your love connections, your romance stories with D&D. If you got questions, I absolutely want to hear them. You know, something that we've talked about a bunch, and it just I don't know, I've owned in on it, and I think we should talk about it more. Is we've been talking about the, you know, the impact of being with a group and how important that's been. You know, especially in like the past year. Say you know, you were saying like, how would I have gotten through this at all? There are people, because this is also my favorite thing about D&D, is playing with people for the first time. I absolutely love it. Like the first time I got to play D&D with my wife, and she was fighting a zombie, and she was like, can I use Ray of Frost to like get frost inside its skull, and then the frost expands and the zombie's head explodes? And I was like, yes. And just her eyes were like, yes. Like those are the best moments.
Keeper, Joe Starr.
Oh, damn right, it's a keeper. But you know, I know it's not as easy for a lot of folks to find that group, or even find the courage to find that group. And you know, I know that we provide, you know, some tools to do so, you know, even in the D&D Beyond Discord, like there are people always looking for games and stuff like that. Do you guys have any advice for folks who are maybe nervous to jump in and take that step, or sort of, you know, be vulnerable really in terms of taking that step? Let's get deep.
Yeah. Something that actually has been like one of the greatest joys in my heart recently is I, as someone who creates content online, have like a Discord community, and there were always people in it who were like, man, I wish I had people to play with. And like, I would love to run games for every one of these people. I would love to. We all know that that's not practical. And they have actually started some games of their own in the Discord, and getting to hear about these people that maybe have never had someone to play with before, them welcoming beginners into it and taking down the barrier for entry of D&D, both the barrier for entry and finding people in person, and for the nervousness of never having played before, has genuinely been one of the things that has just like fueled my soul as to why I keep doing what I do. It's connecting people. It's building spaces for other people to feel safe and comfortable exploring their interests, and watching. I can literally see a few of them in chat that are in the game right now, and just watching them form something together that has brought any kind of like lift and levity and joy in 2021. The horrific, horrifying time that it has been really amazing. So I think that common interest in any kind of community, even if it's not a D&D community, you will find people that want to explore, or maybe didn't even know they wanted to explore D&D. If they're really interested in other kinds of like fan fiction or role play of, you know, there's so many other kinds of like playing pretend on the internet that people don't realize would travel so well into D&D. And having a support system of that game that is not competitive, but cooperative, like Amy said, of working towards that goal together, is something that I think is absolutely irreplaceable. And there is no one that wouldn't be able to find their space in it. I think that's what's really special about D&D, is because there's a game for everybody, right? Yeah. There are people who love like a really rule crunchy, combat heavy game. And there are people like me who I'm like, I mostly want to role play. And then I want one really epic battle, ideally, but like mostly I want to screw around with my friends and I want to push it to the bounds of the rules and see what I can accomplish. And then, you know, there are days where sometimes I'll start and my DM will know that we're having a bad day and know that it's a combat day. Smash things, hit things, hurt things. You'll feel better. Get it out.
I need what do they call those break rooms where you just go in with a bat?
Yeah, I need rage room.
Yeah, rage
Those
room.
are fun.
Who would like to rage? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
I think that's really well said. I think, you know, and I've got some questions for you guys in the chat, but I think, you know, if you're feeling nervous about, you know, sort of taking that step, and I keep trying to make this sound funny because the relationship thing keeps staying in my head. Like if you're just, but I genuinely mean this, you know, just remember, like everyone feels the exact same way. Like everyone feels nervous, everyone feels awkward. And just, yeah, I think just if that can kind of give you any kind of courage, then I think go for it. Got a couple questions for you guys. Reikio407 asks, what was the first time you fell in love with a campaign world's lore? Mine was, I'll give you guys a second to think. I think mine was Dark Sun, because we had a Commodore 64 in my house, and I played the heck out of Dark Sun. I had a party of 4 half giants because I didn't really know how to play the game, and so all I knew was half giants wouldn't immediately die and could punch really well. But I just loved, you know, I mean, it's Mad Max meets Conan the Barbarian, which is always good in my book. So I'd have to say Dark Sun was my first out the gate. Adam, what jazz infused?
I played Dragonlance, first character. So I have a special affinity for Dragonlance. I'll never forget the first character I rolled. We went straight down the line, and I actually rolled the 18 00 strength. And it was like somebody going to play golf for the first time and hitting a hole in one. It's like that person's going to play golf every week of their lives for the rest of their lives, and they're probably never going to do it again, but they're still going to do it, right? And so
that high.
Yeah, it was so thrilling at the time. But then for me, I would say, so a lot of affinity for that. Played the Forgotten Realms pretty quickly after that, but I think for me it was the first time that I created, back when I had time to do this kind of thing, created my own homebrew world. And it was the Isles of Ildakar, and it was a Pangea situation. Cataclysm breaks it into thousands of continents instead of the 6 or 7 or what. And so it was like seafaring, nautical, pirates everywhere, all that kind of thing. And I remember playing through that with a group of friends, running that game for them for several years, and wrapping it up with a spaceship that they thought was a dungeon taking off into space, and that was the literal end of the campaign. And it was completely derivative of anything that I've ever loved, right? But that's what's so great about these games, and that we can take that and put that spin on it. And it was just something that I'll literally never forget, and it probably has like impacted me more than a lot of the other kinds of media that I've consumed over the years, because I participated in it and those players participated in it with me.
Yeah. No, well said. And derivative is okay. Did I love the movie Wild Wild West? No, but did I love putting the giant metal spider in Wild Wild West into a game? Yeah, I love that. Amy, how about you?
Sounds like an Eberron situation. I have most of my long-term campaigns have been in homebrew worlds. So for me, the idea of falling in love with game lore is intertwined with learning worlds that my friends have made, because I've been playing forever, but I've only been DMing for a couple of years. So for me, like the next step of falling in love with that is when I actually tried to step up and start doing it for myself. And it turns out there is a whole different way to fall in love with that when you are the person creating the gifts that everybody else will find. It makes me feel like, as a kid, I was just like, I will read every book ever written, but I didn't have a big fire to write to write a book for myself, because I was like, I would already know how that one ends. What's the point? And it took me a long time to realize, oh, actually, I do a lot of creative stuff. It's just I trick myself into it by playing in other people's games and in other people's worlds, and sitting alone with a book and having dreams. But the joy, weirdly, it's a strange way to answer your question. I'm so sorry about falling in love with lore, but the new relationship I have to it now, as someone who has built that and gotten to watch someone else reflect it back, or see something I didn't see in it, or surprise me with it, very selfishly appreciate a thing I did on purpose, that makes you feel like, oh, I meant for that to happen, and then it happened. And that is turns out a huge thrill. So that I will pair with what Saige said. Don't be scared of DMing, because that can also be terrifying, but it is so much fun. It is so rewarding. The butterflies may be there, may never go away, but you can do it, and it's so much fun. So I'm just gonna tilt it that way.
Love it. Your favorite lore was the friends we made along the way.
I truly was
Saige, how about you?
Similar to Amy, most of the games that I've played in have actually been homebrew. From a lore perspective, I'm a big fan of Ravenloft. Is something that I love so much. Give it all to me. I'm a big fan of Curse of Strahd. I love those settings. I love the darker areas of D&D. I'm somebody who grew up as a dramatic theater kid. So the opportunity to sit at a table and make your friends cry is a strange love of mine. It's something I absolutely adore. It's an incredible goal on a stream too. If chat is crying, I feel like I've done something. I've made you feel something, which is so incredible to me about role playing. A character you've never met, a person you've never met, somebody that you just decided to care about today, making you feel something.
Yeah.
But I think that falling in love with homebrew was a big part of it. My first home game, which has been my longest ongoing game yet. We've turned it into a stream now, but it went on for just about a year, every single week. And it was just with 5 of my favorite people in the world sitting down, having brunch on Sunday and playing D&D. And it was beautiful and in depth and homebrew. And it was the first ongoing campaign I ever played in. And that was a level of investment I got to experience for the first time. Our DM went to the point, Vince Casso, he DMs one of the shows that I do now, but he went to the point of writing essentially a novel to go with this homebrew world. That took me forever to get to reading. But once I did, I was just like, oh my God, Like, this is really what it means to care about the world, to care about the things that came before you and the things that are happening outside of your character and your story. And I
Shout out
loved
to
the
Vince,
ability.
I got to guest on that game recently, and it
Yeah.
was such a blast. The
Yeah.
most recent lore I fell madly in love with was getting up to date to play on some failsafe, because y'all run a great game over there, and Vince's world is so much fun.
Well, I
It
feel
really
pretty
is.
left out at this point. So,
I mean,
yeah.
Pardon me. Then check your DMs after the show.
Okay, excellent.
Well,
Take flip and exit.
Shameless.
we had a meet cute.
Make it happen. Absolutely. But yeah, falling in love with something that my friends built and then was affected and changed by what we were doing in it was the moment that I also decided that I was like, I would love to write a world like this. I would love to expand upon. I would love to try GMing for that reason of letting the players build a world around them. Ugh, it was beautiful.
And I think the cool thing too, that I always want to impress upon this community is that those feelings and those moments and those impacts aren't limited to streamers and streaming shows and stuff like that. When you have that moment just at your table with 4 of your friends or on a Zoom with 4 friends that you've made, like playing this game, they're huge. And there's something incredible about the fact that they're just yours.
Yes.
They're just yours. They're nobody else's. And I think that's really wonderful.
I talk about that a lot as well, of the difference between a home game and a streamed game. A lot of the time, the home games do end up having a little more meaning for me personally, because it's a safe space to explore and experiment without eyes watching and feeling like you're there to entertain other people. You are not there to entertain at that point. You are there to experience. And home games, as anyone who's in the D&D space who has a stream, like, you should have a home game. You should have a place to explore. I think it is a privilege to have a space that no cameras are on. Genuinely.
Certainly a space where it doesn't matter if you're looking off in the corner, as long as you're listening.
Exactly.
I do that anyway on the stream games.
No one can judge you for how many chips you've been eating.
Yeah, no, like real quick, I'll jump in there. We so a group of several streamers who do stream, we have a home game, and of course, especially in these days, it's across Zoom or whatever else. But I mean, when you get to see Mark Meir voice Victor Von Doom because we're playing, an Avengers inspired, like there's just nothing that I would trade for that. And getting to be a complete wisecracker like with Hal Jordan, so it's like we literally just take whatever strange concepts that we could possibly think of for Dungeons and Dragons and do it. And so, like, running that home game, I completely agree with you, Saige. It is essential. So even if you're watching streams, playing in streams, whatever else, that home game, it's just an experience that you're not going to get in those other avenues. Not better or worse or anything else necessarily, but it's just definitely it's complementary, it's different, and so strongly encouraged.
Aaron Lord, we've got time for 2 more questions, then I'll let you all go. And thank you again so much for hanging out with me, and just I don't know, sometimes it's just nice to kind of this year sucked, so sometimes it's kind of nice to just reaffirm this thing that we love.
Yeah.
But Aaron Lore asked, what's your favorite quirk a character has had? Either your own character, is that a He-Man character? Either your own character that you played, or as an NPC that you ran as a DM. My favorite thing, because I've had the immediate question people usually ask is like, what's your favorite class to play or stuff like that. I like Quirk first. I like Hook first, and I like characters that suck. I like characters that have no business being in the position that they're in. Not D&D, but playing Edge of the Empire was I was in a long campaign for Edge of the Empire that was going on in a really like hard time in my life personally. And the very first game I was playing this wannabe, like, this rich kid that was pretending to be a pirate, space pirate, who had like stolen his dad's ship basically. And the very first like skirmish they got into, because in my head at first he was like, yeah, he's a rich kid, but he doesn't suck, but botches all the way through, fails. Everything he did, it like the scene was just him rolling around on the ground with someone and just getting like elbows inadvertently put in his face. And it was like this voila moment. And I was like, oh my God, he's bad at this. And there's something like so fun and freeing about the fact that he's bad at this. So those are my favorite kind of quirks.
I always build characters around the quirk. I get quirk first and then I figure out the rest usually. One of my favorite characters I ever built was a Circle of the Stars druid. And she was just out of it. She was gone. Most of the time she was talking up and mumbling to herself at the skies. She had no connection to social norms in any capacity because she just did what the stars told her to in her belief, and whether or not those are actually the stars, we still don't know. But she insisted upon everybody in the room waving to her. So when she would enter a battle, she would wave at everybody in the room, and she would sit there and she would wave until somebody waved back before she would start doing anything. It was just a polite greeting that she felt like was a respectful move. It's just what you did. And her name was Neptune. And I will always love that character. I only got to play her for a short time, but like there will never be a moment in life that I don't want to bring back this character that just wants hugs and acknowledgement.
I love that. Amy?
I will say I take a special delight when I get to make, as I recently did, but like a variety of sort of old person character. They are very, very fun. I love a character with a long history and strong sort of randomly selected opinions on things in the world, you know, or like just a touch of forgetfulness, not so much that you derail the party, but so that it gives everybody else kind of a lot to do and bounce off of. But in terms of playing a quirk, I don't know if she's going to be mad at me if she finds out that I'm telling tales out of school, but my sister made a Kenku in a family game that we did, just to sort of try out like Kenku speech, and just nailed the like combination of here's where I heard that before, here's how I'm adapting what's going on. It was wonderful. It was brilliant. And that was my favorite. Like, I got to get on your level. So good.
You just saying family game made my heart so warm. I was just like, family game.
Nerd family is a lucky thing to have.
It
I'm
is.
constantly aware of that is not something everybody has access to. And Saige, I do want to. I'm wildly just going off topic on everything, but if you take one thing away from this stream, please let it be when Saige said there is a table out there for you, because there is a table out there for you. If you are not lucky enough to have a D&D party that you grew up with, or someone who happened to come across you in elementary school, that does not mean there is a place for you here. There is a place for you here. There is a table for you here. It might not be the first one you try, and that is okay, because I don't want to lie to you that it's always going to be a perfect experience every time, because that's not how humans work. And you would know that I was lying to you if I said that. But I also don't want to scare you, because it's a great game.
It's like finding a therapist.
People play it.
Exactly.
Join. It's like finding a therapist.
Hop in our Discord. Melly, our amazing community manager, will guide you and help you find some folks. So
yes,
hop in there. Adam, favorite character, quirky thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me in real life, I'm going to be far closer to a Steve Rogers, but then every single character that I play is a Tony Stark. And so I think that it's all just complete escapism for me, probably some kind of psychological escaping responsibilities kind of thing, or, you know, whatever that is. And so I think probably the place where I've had the most fun, but also because it's been challenging and I painted myself into a corner with, is the character Briv Steelmarrow that I played for a while on Beyond Heroes here on the DDB channel. He speaks with an old English accent and like you know, he uses thous and thines and all of that. And so I started out with like, oh, this will be kind of cute or fun, and then it was like, oh, I have to talk like this all the time. And so it is completely turned into just it's completely out of control, but you know, at least when I'm playing it feels like in a good way. So yeah, I think you know, just something that probably shirks responsibility. You know, that scoundrel type character is what I end up playing all the time. And then I speak to my wife afterwards about it, and she's like, "That's not you at all." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I guess I'm just escaping." So.
Well, before we get out of here, I want you guys to plug your socials. I want to say thank you again, and then we're going to close on a very actually important question, which you're going to get a yes or no answer to. But before we get there, Saige, where can people find you on the internets?
You can find me everywhere on the internet at Not Sage. I'm a streamer on my channel that mostly does like just chatting and video games. And then I run the channel Pixel Circus. Pixel Circus is a collaborative channel between a bunch of incredibly talented friends of mine. That's where the game is that Amy and I were discussing earlier called Failed Save. We also have Damsels, Dice, and Everything Nice, which is a Disney princess role-playing game. I get to be Princess Leia and toss around a lightsaber a lot. And it's a lot of fun. Those are on Friday and Saturday nights at twitch.tv/Pixel Circus.
And I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
Amy, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm Amy Dallen. You can find me pretty much anywhere at Enthusiamy. I also stream. I will be streaming later today. We have a book club, so we're in the middle of reading Hitchhikers, but we're taking a break to revisit. There's a comic called Far Sector. It's about a Green Lantern. She's amazing. She's solving a mystery. We're talking about issue 9, and then I'm playing some King's Quest because it's just hang out with old school nerdy stuff.
Yes, that sounds amazing.
That's if you can make a life like that, try.
Yeah. And Adam, look, people don't need my used car salesman pitch to follow you online, but it's so important. I think to everyone that everyone continue to follow you on your adventure, whichever part of New Orleans it takes you to. Can
we just say thank you, Adam? Thank you for as everyone on this call has benefited tremendously from having a tool like D&D Beyond.
Yes.
And you should be so proud, which I hope you are probably already, but I just want to say it.
You've earned that hat.
I appreciate
Certainly
that. Thank you, Amy, Saige, and Joe. And yeah, it's been such an incredible journey. I'm excited to see what the team's going to do next for sure. And yeah, if you need to find me online at Bad Eye Adam on Twitter, because it's hard for me to take the time to read anything that's longer than a tweet. So definitely follow me there. And I can't talk about it yet, but you'll find out about the new adventure on Twitter if you follow me there.
Well, and to close this out, probably the most important question that I saw in chat, and maybe that will be answered about D&D this year. I need just a yes or no from each of you, and then we'll get out of here. Stu Jester asked, question, should centaurs be considered insects in D&D as they have 6 limbs and a thorax? Adam, yes or no?
Yes.
Amy, centaurs are insects, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that's 2 out of 3. Saige?
No.
No.
The voice of dissent.
I think it's more complicated than that.
I've got to keep this controversy raging through the year. I got to side with Saige. Split decision.
50-50.
I demand a recount.
50-50, much like a centaur themselves. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us today. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments, when was the first time you fell in love with D&D? Do you need someone to play D&D with? Does your group have an opening? If D&D Beyond comments become the OkCupid of finding your D&D group, then I consider this a job well done.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time over here on D&D Beyond. Thanks, everybody.